have two secret special guests. One just got it on, but the first one I'm going to use right now. It's a friend of mine. On his name, there, can you get by down? His name is David Marshall. So we should start coming up here. Is David there? Where's David? There he is. He's going to spend a couple of minutes, and he's going to do a couple of little poems, and then I have one more guest. Please welcome David Marshall.
Thanks everyone. So I'm gonna read a couple of poems. They're both ones that I just wrote over the last couple of days, thinking about this sort of event. I've been working on an ongoing project of lamentations, which I'm not 100% sure what lamentation means, but the way I'm sort of thinking of it is that it's a collection of, like, more often than not quite sad poetry. The first poem I'm going to read is called A George Michael Song About a George Michael Song.
Good. Yes.
I'm reading a biography of George Michael. When the book gets to the event where George Michael was arrested for indecent exposure in a park washroom in Beverly Hills, it becomes difficult to tell whether the author, James Gavin, is sympathetic to George Michael's position on who is responsible or who is in the right or not. The event is framed as an extension of George Michael's reckless and self-destructive tendencies because it was so avoidable. He quotes one of his associates as asking, "Why didn't he just hire a sex worker?" At a glance, this reaction isn't necessarily sex negative or sex normative. It isn't specifically a judgment of park cruising, but more so it's a pragmatic reaction, taking the opinion that hiring a sex worker would have been much more discreet while going cruising in parks in the mid-90s when police sting operations were common was inherently much riskier. James Gavin quoted Michael in another part of the book saying, "You don't pay a sex worker for the sex. You pay them to leave afterwards." So the mistake George Michael made when he was cruising in the park wasn't that cruising in a park was wrong, but that it exposed him to risk in ways that more discreet sexual behavior wouldn't have. So while James Gavin doesn't use his own words to provide his opinion and doesn't say that George Michael was wrong to cruise in a public park, the reader is steered towards the conclusion that George Michael was reckless in choosing to do so and exposed himself to the risk of being arrested through his actions in ways he easily could have avoided by behaving like other wealthy, discreet celebrities in Hollywood. But when George Michael went cruising in parks, dressed in track pants, a hoodie, and a baseball cap, because he didn't want to be recognized, he could seek out sex whenever he wanted to, without the complexity of the other person knowing they were sucking off George Michael, even though, at this point, he already had the habit of shaving his beard into a Machiavellian handlebar mustache and soul patch that I'm sure a lot of people probably recognized. When George Michael went cruising in the park, he could lay shirtless in the grass beside the washroom entrance in the sun, despite how he was usually uncomfortable being seen shirtless since he was self-conscious about his body weight. When George Michael went cruising in bathrooms, he could have sex openly, brazenly, compulsively, the way somebody who feels no shame about sex might have sex. But even if George Michael felt no shame about how he chose to have sex, James Gavin makes the case that he should have at least felt a justified fear of being caught, that he could have easily avoided the way he was socially punished for cruising in a park. But of course, George Michael wasn't being punished for cruising in a park. He was being humiliated for trying and failing to be discreet for so long. It was either that he didn't come out of the closet when everybody wanted him to, like they tried to make him do so for so long, or maybe because he didn't stay in the closet successfully for longer until he could do it in a more dignified way, or maybe until sometime after he died. After all, pretty much everyone had already resolved that George Michael was obviously gay and closeted, that the female pronouns in all his songs were unconvincing, that all the women he dated and or bragged about having sex with were beards or made up, and that all his songs about shameless, open sex, lust, and daddy role-playing were empty of any substance and overall fairly ironic. Probably, a lot of people loved the opportunity to say that, actually, George Michael was ashamed of his sexuality, like anyone else, and that maybe he should be, that he should at least have enough shame to be a bit more discreet, like so many others, and more importantly, that he takes himself and his music a bit too seriously. Either the hypocrisy, or the irony, or the impracticality of the closeted man being arrested for public sex should confirm that to everyone, that he's already gotten more attention than he deserved, and that it's more dignified for everyone involved if we stop thinking of him as a sexual liberationist the way that we think about Elvis or Madonna. But more often, George Michael was punished for too many of his songs being sad and dreary, or if not for that, for his upbeat songs being too poppy and empty of substance. He was punished for too many of his songs sounding like his own songs, for either forgetting how to write a simple pop song someone can sing to, or for making another snooze fest of an album with more whining and complaining about the hardships of being rich and famous. But actually, I've always wanted my writing to sound something like either a Walt Whitman poem or a George Michael song.
Yeah.
So how do I activate Plowder Lube? Well, to activate Plowder Lube, just add water right up to the fill line, and it's located on the back of every charger. And add warm or cold water, although warm water is recommended. And of course, to prevent injury, never use hot water. Give it a little massage and a shake, and Plowder dissolves into a super solution of the perfect lube. Order Plowder Lube at plowder.com.